tonight on Primetime Politics, gathering support.
We will be equally unequivocal in our response.
Make no mistake about it, the President knows we're here.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau goes to Brussels, and Canada's 13 premiers visit the White House, all sending a message to President Donald Trump: back off on the threats of tariffs. We speak with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce about the vulnerability of Canada's major cities. 5 former prime ministers are asking Canadians to show the flag as never before on National Flag Day, February 15th. Canada's 19th Prime Minister, Kim Campbell, will tell us why they have crossed party lines in this show of national unity. The gap in voter support between Liberals and Conservatives is closing, according to several recent polls. Will this surge last? Éric Grenier, founder of the Writ.ca, digs into the numbers. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Julie Van Dusen, sitting in for Michael Serapio. Canada's politicians continue to send the message that any new tariffs imposed by the United States will be met with strong reciprocal action. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke with reporters during his meetings at the European Union today, as did Canada's premiers before they sat down with senior advisors at the White House.
It's important to understand that Canada will respond as appropriate in a calibrated but extremely strong way, regardless of what the U.S. moves forward with. It's not our choice. We don't want to be doing that, but we will, regardless of the level of tariffs that eventually the administration might move forward on. We will be equally unequivocal in our response.
Make no mistake about it, the President knows we're here. He knows we're concerned. He knows we're working across the aisle, no matter if it's Democrat or Republican. We just want to move forward. We'd like zero tariffs.
The first choice is to have no tariff, to have a general agreement as soon as possible. And maybe Mr. Trump, when you look at what happened in the last few weeks, maybe he will postpone those tariffs. So we have to be careful. We want to have a deal with no tariff.
I think diplomacy is working. I think that the fact that we got a 30-day reprieve was because we agreed to work on the cross-border problem of fentanyl. So what I would say is what I've seen from this president is that he is prepared to make a deal. We've made a deal on that. I think we can make a deal on steel and aluminum by making very much the same argument that I've been making on energy and critical minerals.
Here at home, all former prime ministers have signed a letter urging Canadians to proudly fly the flag as the 60th anniversary of its first raising approaches on Saturday. The letter, released yesterday, reads in part, "In recent weeks, we've witnessed a surge of Canadian pride and patriotism in the face of threats and insults from Donald Trump. Canadians have come together to express their love of our country and their determination to defend Canada's values and our independence. As former Prime Ministers of Canada, we applaud this national spirit and we call on our fellow Canadians to show the flag as never before. On Flag Day 2025, let's fly our flag with pride. Let's show the world that we are proud of our history and proud of our country." Here to talk about the letter is former Prime Minister Kim Campbell. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
So as I was thinking of this letter and, of course, the fact that you've all come together like this, and I think Jean Chrétien is the one that kind of got it all going. You, of course, were rivals in 1993, and now fast forward, here we are in 2025, and you're working as a concerted effort. What's the message then?
Well, I think the message is that we have fractious politics in Canada, and Canadians like to knock down, drag out divisions, and parties offer voters choice, but there are big issues where we come together, and I think this is one of them. I think when it's a question of standing for our national, pride and our national honor, I think that there are no disagreements. So, and also, we're former prime ministers. We're not, pretending to have our hands on the levers of power. We have elected politicians and people who are serving, whose job it is to, deal with these issues in real time. But as former prime ministers, we're proud of those, the jobs that we held, and we're proud of our country. And so we feel that it's appropriate to come together and use that political capital, however small it is, to encourage Canadians to do something that may make them feel better. I think that sometimes we feel a little bit powerless when we're faced with these kinds of situations, and being reminded that it's the 60th anniversary of our flag, gives us a nice excuse to go back and think about what that means to us.
So now waving the flag is very patriotic and so on, but what will it do to discourage a Donald Trump who wants to bring in tariffs and wants to take us over as his 51st state?
Well, I don't know that it's going to have any impact on President Trump. I'm not sure that's the point, except that if there is an incident, that dog behind you is my dog Leo, who is a Canadian dog. So
well, there you go. You should have a flag on him, I think. But anyway, keep going.
I think it's certainly that, strong demonstrations of a national will and commitment to independence. It can't do any harm. We're not pretending that this is necessarily going to change the world. But I think that for Canadians themselves, it might be kind of therapeutic to feel that there's something you can do that connects you with a sense of solidarity with your fellow Canadians. I have to say that, not that I am entertaining the possibility of joining the United States, but I also think it's a little bit odd that a country, the second largest country by territory in the world with 10 provinces and 3 territories, would become the 51st state. Maybe 13 more states, and all that entails in terms of proportionate representation. I mean, it's the whole thing is just a little bit goofy.
Well, and there's a lot of opinions on how to approach this. Last night, Stephen Harper was in Ottawa for a book launch, and if you haven't heard what he said, if I was still Prime Minister, I would be prepared to impoverish the country and not be annexed. If that was the option we're facing. He also said, I would accept any level of damage to preserve the independence of the country. So, what is the best approach? I know you've called Donald Trump a bully. Do you tiptoe around him, or what do you do?
Well, I think there are, a number of different theories about it, but I think the first thing is to stand up for your own independence. We signed a free trade agreement with the United States, and then the NAFTA, the legacy of that, which was join Mexico, was renegotiated in the first Trump administration. And when you negotiate a deal and you sign a deal, you stick to it. If you think you want to change the terms of the deal, then you reopen negotiations. You don't just say, oh, well, the hell with that deal, we're not going to follow it anymore. So there is a certain protocol and good manners and integrity that you have in dealing internationally with other sovereign countries. And I think that what makes people so uncomfortable about this, sudden launching of tariffs and the attack on Canada is, first of all, it's based on, an untrue assessment of what Canada means to the United States. And we are not being subsidized by the United States. It's actually a very mutually beneficial agreement. And a lot of our benefit to the United States is not purely economic. It's also the fact that they have a northern border on which there is a peaceful, democratic country that can be a strong ally and doesn't require them to be, constantly worried about their security. So, I guess just the point is that I'm not going to second guess the people in our government now. And that's certainly not the intention of this letter that we've signed. It is an effort to address Canadians and say, one of the things that you can do that would perhaps give you a shot in the arm, make you feel some sense of agency, but that also communicates to a message to the United States and to the world about Canada's commitment to its independence, is to take advantage of this remarkable 60th anniversary of our new flag. It's not so new anymore, to demonstrate our affection for it, but for what it stands for. So I think if ordinary people are feeling that they're not sure what they can do, this is one small way in which we can demonstrate how we feel about our country, and by taking advantage of our Flag Day.
So let me ask you, you were talking about democracies and so on. What's your view of how other Western democracies have responded to this? Canada is under attack. Trump has his sights on other places like Greenland. Are you disappointed, observant of the fact that no one seems to be standing there saying, quit beating up on Canada?
Well, I don't know if anybody is or not. I know that Denmark, in response to the comments about Greenland, has now suggested that it would be willing to buy California. So it's hard for countries to know how serious to take this. I take it very seriously because I think it's dangerous not to. But I think that countries in the world are horrified, and what they will say will depend on where this goes. I mean, when first the threat of tariffs was touted, the president then backed off. So many people may have thought, well, okay, that was a tempest in a teapot. Now he's threatening to, reinitiate this idea, and people will take it more seriously. But I think Stephen Harper is right in the sense that when you're encountering bullies, you may think that you can appease them, but you can't. You can fairly negotiate, and if somebody has a genuine concern, then you can genuinely take their concern into account and try to do the best you can to try and make a friendship work better. But this does not come at the expense of your own sovereignty. So we have lots of issues in our country, but it's for us to decide them. And I think what I feel, and I get the sense from other people too, is aside from being insulted and offended, it's very disappointing because, we expect more from the United States. But the States is one of the world's great democracies. But, Canada is also one of the oldest democracies in the world. And,
so, Ms. Campbell, unfortunately, we could talk forever, but I have one last question because we would love to talk for an hour, but I know you're busy too. I know you follow politics carefully, so my last question, and you can make it quick, is we've got an election coming, we have a Liberal leadership. As you look forward, who do you think is best positioned to deal with Donald Trump?
Well, I don't want to get into that political battle, but I think that is certainly one of the questions that Canadians will have on their mind as they participate in these two choices of people who might lead us. And who'd have thought, that would be something that would, in 2024, still have to be a consideration for the Canadian electorate. But it's in their hands to figure that out.
Wow, very diplomatic answer. So you've got a couple of days to put a little flag on that dog for Flag Day. It was very nice talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
The premiers are in Washington, D.C. today speaking with Americans about the negative impacts of tariffs on both sides of the border. Despite the ongoing diplomatic work, there is no indication that the tariffs can be avoided. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce is looking into which Canadian cities are most vulnerable to a trade war. Matthew Holmes is the Chamber's Executive Vice President and Chief of Public Policy. He's here to break it down for us. Hello, Matthew. You've done a very interesting analysis of Canadian cities and in terms of how the tariffs would affect them. So the ones that jump out are Calgary, St. John, New Brunswick, and Windsor, Ontario. Can you give us an idea why those cities are first and foremost on your list?
Yeah, great to be with you. And first, I should give some credit to our team at the Business Data Lab and our chief economist, Steve Tapp, who put this report together. He's on the road today, but I'm happy to walk you through the results that they found. When you look at the cities most exposed here, it really lines up with areas of concentration in certain key sectors and industries that we know are very trade exposed with the U.S. tariff threats. So St. John, New Brunswick, Calgary, Alberta come up right at the top of the list. They are high energy intensive municipalities, oil and gas in Calgary and refinery in St. John put them at the top of the list with a lot of north-south trade to the U.S. And so they're showing quite strongly. As you move down the list, you see automotive, and we've heard a lot from Ontario around auto manufacturing, auto parts, the OEMs out of Windsor, Ontario, but you also have Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo, Brantford, and Guelph, all key areas in the automotive sector. And then as you move down into the rest of the top 10, you start seeing cities that are exposed through concentration in steel and aluminum, and we've heard a lot of new tariffs promised for steel and aluminum. So the cities in parts of Quebec that are responsible for a big part of our aluminum trade, Hamilton as well in Ontario, a big steel producing town, those show up on our list as well.
So when I looked at the list, at first I thought it was rather surprising that Calgary was there, because you think of the energy exports, which are obviously big from that city, but that Donald Trump has said he was only going to hit energy with 10%. So you think, oh, maybe they have a better chance of surviving this. So how does that all work then in terms of energy exports coming out of Alberta?
Well, I think the 10% tariff that's been put on energy or promised for energy still is material. It's still felt. It'll be felt by consumers at the pumps, and it's being felt by the producers and exporters as well once it comes into effect. And so that is reflected in the weighting and in the numbers. We've looked at the 10% versus the 25% for other products.
And I suppose when you look at New Brunswick, it's also the fact that they export a lot of lumber. So when you think down of the fact that all these premiers are in Washington, what are you hopeful that anything is going to be accomplished?
Well, I think it's important that they're there. They're showing a full, a full Team Canada approach, and they're having serious conversations. They're signaling that they're willing to negotiate to strike a deal, but they're also calling in the relationships that are so important. And one of the other things the Canadian Chamber recently put out is a tracker of trade at the sub-national level. And by that, I mean at the provincial to state level. So you can actually see there's 34 states in the US that Canada is their #1 trading partner. And if you look at the top three, that we're top three for 44 out of the 50 states. So having those conversations led by premiers, led at the provincial level, bringing it right down to communities, to supply chains, to cities, to say to mayors, to say to governors, hey, this will impact jobs, it'll impact affordability, this is a real issue for you too. That begins to develop a chorus of voices on the US side to say, wait a second here, we're worried about affordability, we're worried about home building and the housing crisis, we're worried about jobs in our communities, and we think trade with Canada actually helps with those needs.
But Donald Trump has been agitating about this, about the tariffs and the 51st state and so on since towards the end of November, and it hasn't made any difference. He's the guy at the top, and he's a tariff lover. So isn't this all, not waste of time, because that would never, you'd never want that. But I mean, how effective is it if he's not even listening?
Well, I think Canadians expect their leaders to advocate for them and for their best interests. So I think that's what the premiers are doing today. Every day that we have of trade between Canada and the US is $3.6 billion. And so every day we get, we're gonna take, and we're gonna push for another day. I don't think we can avoid this entirely. He's pretty focused in on this, but we need to make the case. We need to show that trade with Canada and the two economies together can build big things and do great things together, but that needs to be done together. And
right.
So if it comes to tariffs and retaliation.
Just, I guess my point, because we don't have a lot of time left, but lots of trade between the two countries, billions of dollars, but isn't it time to think about diversifying and taking your business to places that are actually going to welcome it? Are your members doing that now?
Absolutely. That's such an important point. But it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of capital investment. And if you're looking at internal barriers to trade in the country or diversified global trade, we need better trade infrastructure in Canada. We need to be reducing some of those regulatory barriers, and that takes time. The tariffs we will feel overnight. So we need to be taking that serious as the immediate concern and emergency. But yes, diversifying and building out a broader economy and a healthier and more resilient economy here at home is also a priority, but that takes a bit more time.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's obvious your organization and many others have a lot to juggle. Have a great day. That was Matthew Holmes of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.
Take care.
Turning now to Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc, who was also in Washington today. LeBlanc met with top U.S. officials, including Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Lutnick, sometimes referred to as Trump's tariff chief, is leading a review into U.S. trade deals and is expected to deliver a report on the matter in April. Speaking about his meeting with Lutnick today, LeBlanc says Canada has the attention of the U.S. administration.
But we had a rather detailed conversation about those sectors, which I thought gave us an understanding of their concerns. We're going to continue, obviously, to work with them, with the Trump administration around the review that Mr. Lutnick is leading for a tariff decision at the beginning of April. Canada and the rest of the world is part of that conversation, but we now have, I think, a good understanding of their process markers over the next number of weeks. And they were very clear that Canada very much has their attention, and they want to work with us to structure an economic deal that's in the interest of both countries.
Public opinion polls on the federal parties are shifting, and the gap between the Conservatives and the Liberals appears to be narrowing. Still, the Tories are maintaining an important lead. Here to dig into some of the most recent polls is Éric Grenier. He's the author and founder of the Writ newsletter. Hi, Éric. Great to see you.
Good to be here.
So can you kind of decipher some of this stuff for us? For months, in fact, probably more than a year, we saw the Conservatives always in the lead. So what are some of these polls telling you now?
Yeah, it is really surprising to see the shift and just how quickly it has taken place. As you said, the Conservatives have been leading in the polls by 20 points, 25 points now for a long time. But we've seen really in the last few weeks that a lot of polls have been showing that the gap between the Liberals and the Conservatives is now somewhere between 8 and 13 points, sometimes even a little bit less than that. And these are polls that either mention Justin Trudeau as still being the leader of the Liberal Party or don't mention a leader at all. So it's just a big shift that we've seen. And it's really happened over the last few weeks, because if we were just looking at where the polls were in early January, mid-January, the Liberals were in danger of not even finishing in second place. And now it looks like we actually might have a race on our hands.
Wow. Who would have ever thought of that? So where are the Liberals picking up the support?
Well, it does seem to be coming from across the country. We've seen that the Liberals have moved back into at least second, and in some polls are cresting first in Quebec, ahead of the Bloc Québécois. We're seeing that the gap has closed in Ontario, that some polls are now putting the Liberals either very close to the Conservatives or ahead in Atlantic Canada. So we have seen a lot of movement. And we should still say, though, that it is a Conservative lead in all the polls that we've seen, at least the ones that mention Trudeau or don't mention a party leader. The Conservative lead is still big enough to win another election. But some of these polls, when we're talking about a lead that is 6 to 8 points, you can't actually put it in the bank that would produce a Conservative majority government. We were talking just a few weeks ago that the Conservatives could win 200, 230 seats with the kind of numbers we're seeing. Now they're still favored to win an election if one were held today, but you couldn't say for certain that they would get enough seats to get a majority government. So this has just been a big shift, and I think one that we did not expect to happen so quickly.
Okay, so we can all guess at what the reason might be, but you tell me. So what's happened in the past few weeks that have shifted these numbers so much?
Well, I think there's been three things, and the fact that they've all taken place at around the same time are contributing to it. One is the resignation of Justin Trudeau. I think that he was dragging down the party, and the fact that he's now resigned, he's not going to be the leader of the Liberals going to the next election, has loosened up some voters who were primarily motivated to support the NDP or support the Conservatives because they didn't want to vote for Justin Trudeau. Then there was, of course, the threats of tariffs from Donald Trump, which gave Trudeau a bit of a chance to be a bit of the crisis Trudeau that we saw during the pandemic, which I think actually has improved his own numbers. And now we have also the Liberal leadership race with Mark Carney being right now very far ahead of Chrystia Freeland, seemingly the front runner to win this. And he does seem to have had a big impact on Liberal numbers. When polls ask, who would you vote for if it was the Liberal Party led by Mark Carney, we're actually looking at a tie between the Conservatives and the Liberals, something that we have not seen in nearly 2 years. So I think that those confluence of factors have produced what we've seen now in the polling numbers, both without Carney mentioned as leader of the party and with him as mentioned as a hypothetical leader of the Liberals.
So the advent of Donald Trump, the tariffs, the fact the Liberals are in the middle of a leadership contest, and that Justin Trudeau will be gone March 9th. So there's lots to look for as we go forward. I mean, obviously, Pierre Poilievre is looking at these numbers too, so he's probably wondering whether he has to pivot and so on. There's leadership debates coming up in the Liberal Party, the March 9th contest. What kind of things will pollsters be looking at as we go forward in the coming weeks to see where everything might land?
I think the first thing is whether these numbers are just a bit of a sugar high from all the events that we've seen over the last little while, that Liberal voters or people that are at least sympathetic to the Liberals are much more enthused, much more enthusiastic, much more willing to take part in polls. So whether these numbers are actually going to be sustained in the longer term. And then once we see Mark Carney, if he does win the leadership race, which is not a given, he could still lose it. If he does win it, does the numbers that we've seen in the polls that are very positive for the Liberals with Mark Carney seen as leader, can he actually sustain those numbers? Because a lot of Canadians still don't have a very well-formed idea of who Mark Carney is as a party leader. And I think it's still an open question whether a lot of the bump that we've seen in the polls for the Liberals and for the Carney Liberals, the hypothetical Carney Liberals, is driven by his reputation and his resume. Is he going to actually be able to live up to those if he does become leader, once more people are actually seeing him in action, once he's putting forward policy, once he's actually making some changes to the government, if that's what happens. So I think that is really what's going to be keyed in on, is whether these numbers are a little bit of a mirage, a little bit of a phantom number, or is it something that's real and means that the next election is going to be a lot closer than I think we were expecting it to be.
Right, and so much will be determined by who wins on March 9th and when the next election will be called, right? I mean, a lot of it is to do with timing, and then of course the tariffs are all kind of squeezing in on that, so a lot to watch for. So Eric, it was great having you on today, and we just thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you.
That's our show for this edition of Primetime Politics. I'm Julie Van Dusen, sitting in for Michael Serapio. From all of us at CPAC, thanks for watching.